Welcome to Top Franchise Trends for 2023. We are going to cover as much as we can in under an hour, segments being marketing, franchise development, and then internal operations, specifically focused on umbrella and multi-brand, because that is where we are all from. So for our featured presenters, we have Brian Woods from Neighborly, who is the Group VP of Franchise Development. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Woods. I am the Group Vice President for Franchise Development for Neighborly Brands. We are the largest franchisor of home services. We have now 19 franchise concepts. We actually just acquired another franchise concept last week, Junk King. So we're up to 19 in North America. I actually manage 6 of those franchise concepts that deal with repair brands. I've been with Neighborly for a year. Prior to Neighborly, I was with Motel 6 for about 7 years, doing franchise development for the Motel 6 and Studio 6 franchises.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And next we have Angela, who's the CMO of Buzz Franchise Brands, also coming straight off of her annual convention. So she's ready to go. Angela, give us a little bit about your background.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, so I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Buzz Franchise Brands. We have 4 different service brands. We have Pool Scouts, which is a pool cleaning franchise, Home Clean Heroes, which is residential house cleaning, British Swim School, which is swim instruction and water safety, and then recently launched a 4th brand called Grand Illuminations. That's a holiday lighting business. I've been with the company for 10 years, which is how long the company has been around. So we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary a couple months ago. Our founding brand was Mosquito Joe, which is now under the Neighborly portfolio. So when I started, that was what we were working on, and then eventually developed into a multi-brand company. And prior to franchising, my background was in advertising and higher education marketing.
Awesome. I love the connections already. And last but not least, we have Josh Liggins from Inspire Brands. He is the franchise development manager of some small brands you may know, kind of like Dunkin' Donuts, little tiny brands. Josh, give us a little bit about your background.
Very much emerging concepts. Thanks, Maddie, for the invite here. Yeah, so I'm a part of Inspire Brands. We are the 2nd largest restaurant company in the United States. Some of the tiny brands that we own, Dunkin', Baskin, Arby's, Sonic, Buffalo Wild Wings Go, one of our new hot concepts that you'll see coming to a neighborhood near you. And our most unknown concept is Rusty Taco, which is, I think, like the Shake Shack of the Tex-Mex arena. So super excited about our brands. Previous to being in franchising, I was in education, middle school math teacher. So it's a little bit about me.
Well, I definitely could brush up on some math. So maybe we'll get some swap for some tutoring. I never learned long division. Haven't needed it so far, but and then yeah, I'm Madeleine Zook, Director of Marketing at Netsertive. Also a franchisee with my husband. We own 4 brands, and depending on how you count territories, anywhere from 10 to 20 locations in the Philadelphia area. And then I was a former franchisor with what is now called Threshold Brands for just a little bit under a decade. So lots of experience there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Here is our agenda for the day. So what can your brands expect in 2023? Here's the major departments: sales and marketing. Where are we focusing our budgets? How do we market our marketing to franchisees? And, what are those new hot channels? Fran Dev, goal setting, market expectations, where you're investing your money, your lead generators. Are there new hot tickets on the market we're not aware of? And then internally, how are you beating the competition? How are you working with strategies? And then that big kind of monster that's always the multi-brand organization and cross-selling. So hopefully we get to all of it. If not, then you can pay us heavily for our deck. No, just kidding. All right. So Angela is going to start us off with the marketing section. I'll throw in a little tidbits here or there. First, we're going to go over consumer recommended channels, franchisee adoption of the marketing campaigns, and then some new marketing channels to test, to leave a little bit of budget room for. So Angela, I will let you take it away. I have put 3 pillars that are typically the major pillars that you're going to have to cover, sans Fran Dev marketing. So let us know what's working. You know, what do you have planned for your franchisees in 2023?
All right. Well, this is a big topic that I could probably spend the whole hour on. So I'm going to count on you to keep me on track from a time perspective as I share some of this. And if there's anything you want me to dig deeper on, let me know. But how you have it outlined here on the slide here, starting out with the first pillar of consumer marketing. When I think about the channels that you should be in for this type of marketing, I like to think of it as making sure that the basics are really solid first, and then always having a little bit of kind of fun money to test new things with, so that you're always able to bring in new concepts throughout the year, but you're not sacrificing anything that you know works. I think sometimes it can be easy for people to fall into the trap of trying to be doing the coolest, sexiest new things without really putting the thought behind whether or not it makes sense for their brand. So I think some of those staples, really thinking about the consumer and how they go looking for brands, online is certainly the place you want to be very strong. And I think before you even get to the advertising aspects of online, just making sure that your online presence is really strong. So people who are searching for you, people who are researching your company because they saw you somewhere else, you want to make sure that your website is optimized and developed well. You want to make sure that any of the reviews that are popping up are showing up well, and that you're responding to any reviews, whether they're positive or negative. So responding to negative reviews shows that you've got a good customer service experience for people. It shows that you care. And then responding to positive reviews, I think, is equally important, but often overlooked. We use the analogy of a high five, and like leaving somebody hanging on a high five. Like they've got their hand up, they're like, "We love you, you did such a great job." And then we just sort of leave them hanging because they're not mad at us. So we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure we give them that high five and we say, "Thanks, we love you too." And really focus on making sure, you know, those are the people that are going to be giving us referrals. Those are the people that are going to hopefully remain our loyal customers. So making sure that you've got that online reputation set, responding to reviews, and that all of your profiles are set up well. Google My Business profiles being another example there. There's a lot of tools and elements of those that have been added on over time. So making sure you don't just set it and forget it there. And then you can layer in the advertising component of online. So I always recommend starting with search marketing first. That's sort of your low-hanging fruit, the people that you know are searching for products or similar or services similar to yours. But then I think, you know, as long as your budget allows, always layering in some awareness tactics from a digital perspective too. So whether that be programmatic or display type advertising, remarketing, things like that. Those actually support search as well. So, you know, when you think about someone searching and the top results that show up, you know, people tend to look mostly at maybe the top 3 results. Of those 3, if there's one they've heard of and 2 they haven't, they're probably going to pick the one that they've heard of. So making sure that you're deriving that awareness in other places, so they've already heard of you by the time you show up in search, is a really powerful thing as well. And you can do that outside of online marketing as well through local marketing. That is essential to layer on to any business. We all like doing business with people. So making sure we encourage franchisees to be out there in their communities, putting a face to their business, building partnerships. I think it's important to think about who your audience is when you think about the types of partnerships that you want to make. So whether your audience is moms, homeowners, pet owners, foodies, whatever it may be, use that as your guide to think about the local partnerships and places that you might want to advertise online are as well, where people are going to find information. And then also just thinking about some of the traditional other ways of advertising. We do a lot of direct mail advertising. That tends to be really effective with home services and service brands in general. Whether or not, you know, that's been effective for other brands. Some people say direct mail is dead. It's definitely not in our experience. But I think you have to know your brand and you have to know your audience when you're making those sorts of decisions. And then I know we're going to talk about kind of some of the new, fun, around the corner sort of stuff. I would put that more in the area of stuff you want to have a little bit of money to test with, but not get too carried away with when you're thinking about your mix as well.
Awesome. And this really goes for consumer and employee marketing. I know there are separate pillars, but making sure, like you said, your base is good, because how many times have we seen people send, oh, I got 500 link clicks. Cool. How many people converted? Oh, none. Okay. We have a problem.
Yeah. And certainly paying attention to the data and using that to drive the decisions and where you're spending your time when it comes to that sort of thing.
And then what are your thoughts when it comes to the National Brand Fund, or NAF, if you will?
Yeah. So I think of it as a place where we can really kind of overlay what our franchisees are doing at a local level. So, that marketing, we're really looking to focus on all the areas where we have open locations. But it may be, for us, it may vary a bit by brand. But for example, if our franchisees are doing a great job of search marketing locally, we can complement that with some of the awareness tactics of digital marketing, again, to support when people are showing up in search being the one that's chosen. Also, public relations is a great use of brand marketing dollars, giving the opportunity, again, to kind of put a face to the business, and also third-party credibility. So you get the human element, and you get the aspect of these are real people who really care about what they're doing. We've been fortunate to have some really great opportunities to have our franchisees on TV segments or in news articles. And it makes people feel like they know the business a bit more before they've even had an interaction directly with the business. So definitely recommend PR from that regard. And then also a good use of that budget, I think, is content development, building things that our franchisees can use, whether that be at the brand level or the local level, and making sure that our corporate websites and franchisee local websites are well optimized and positioned for those people doing research online.
And I think that's great, because a lot of times I think people look at that national ad fund or even the franchisees and they're thinking, oh, there's a gajillion dollars in there. Why aren't we running a Super Bowl ad? Why don't I have buses driving around with my logo on them? And sure, you can do that, but realistically, what's going to support you better than, the stuff that trickles down locally? And that's going to be a trend that we talk about throughout here. Because at the end of the day, how many times have we told our franchisees, wow, you donated $1,000 to kids in need, write a press release? They are never writing that press release. So being able to capture all of the PR for them, whether that's an internal person or a supplier, and again, the content creation, because trust me, you don't want your franchisees making their own videos. I know there's something to be said for the human aspect, but I've never seen it great. So that's definitely something that's, doesn't have to be big and snazzy for it to be effective.
Yeah. And I think the age of your business too can play a lot into that as well, right? Like if you're an emerging brand, what you're doing with the marketing fund is going to look quite different than if you're a brand who has been around a lot, already has awareness completely built. There's going to be different strategies to that as well. Exactly.
And for some new channels on the radar, and I told Angela, like, I will cover most of this because this is, Netsertive's sweet spot, but we can also, I'm sure people will chime in here. I think the biggest thing is going to be connected TV, and there's a little description there because I know it kind of is confusing, but the best part of connected TV is basically you're running commercials. They have no minimums for the most part, and you can geofence as deep as you want, as well as, your regular targeting as well, household income, that sort of stuff. So away is the kind of linear cable. Oh, you're stepping into a $50,000 contract that doesn't even include creative, to something that is much more budget friendly, franchise friendly in terms of localizing. And to be honest, everyone's on streaming. I mean, my husband the other day was like, why do we have 15 streaming channels? Isn't there just one thing we can have? I was like, yeah, it was called cable. It was called cable, and it charged us a lot of money. So now we've got Peacock and everything. So that's definitely here to stay. Next up is TikTok and influencers. Everybody knows that I am not team TikTok for franchising. However, if you have a brand such as Color Me Mine, which Debo Pageant, I don't know if she's on here right now, they do great. They get free advertising from the Kardashians because the Kardashians love Color Me Mine and they tag them. So it depends on your brand. While I'm not going to say TikTok is here to stay, you definitely can get quick hits. And what it is here to stay is the influencer market. The people that are relying on the expert knowledge of strangers because they see them as friends, they see their content, they know they're knowledgeable. So that is here to stay and definitely something that can be taken advantage of in the future. And then we're also looking at AI and audio advertising. The audio is probably still about a year and a half off before it really sets into the franchise segment. And by audio, I mean like, I'm going to say it and then my Google's going to go off. Hey, Alexa, what is the top home cleaning service? Or hey, Alexa, where's the nearest Dunkin' Donuts? Making sure that you're capturing that just as you would in a typical search. And then AI, which is more catered towards content creation, where we now have robots that are writing PR releases. I had one that was written about a colleague of mine the other day, and I was like, it did not hit me that this was an AI generated article until I was like, this is a kind of not a great writer. And then my friend was like, yeah, because it's a robot. So that sort of AI is coming down the pike too. And obviously robots are cheaper than humans in most regards. So something that you will see as a content option in the future. Angela, anything to mention on that? On any of these?
I can do just a couple quick hits. We are definitely active with connected TV. I think that's a great way to reach people now through the Apple TVs and the Rokus and all that of the world. I think it's only going to get more expensive as more people start advertising there. So you might as well jump on and get involved before it gets too crazy.
Grandfathered in.
Yeah, exactly. The TikTok and influencers, I think, when people hear TikTok, sometimes they think that the only way to be involved in TikTok is having a platform and building and pushing out regular content there. And I think you made a good point. We try to be very careful both in what we do and what we recommend, how we recommend our franchisees spending time. And sometimes social media networks can become a time suck, and you really want to stay focused on the ones that are most important for you. But there are ways, and we do it through influencers as well, where you can still be on these channels or getting exposure there without needing to have a full dedication to the platform. And then AI, I think it's such a buzzword, right? Like we've been doing AI things for many, many years now. It's really just, using data to automate processes. And it's interesting you bring up the article thing, because I was just reading about a new product coming out called Lex that's basically Google Docs with an AI component. And it is pretty crazy what it can come up with. I mean, you could literally say, write half your article and then say, give me 5 counter arguments to that. And then it would write up, the tool would write up 5 counter arguments to whatever had already been written. Pretty crazy stuff. But I think the point is a lot of that stuff isn't there to the point where it's going to be something polished you'd actually want to use. It's more like maybe you've got writer's block and that can help you come up with something that you can go back and tweak. But I think more for us from the AI perspective, it's using things or exploring things like Google has Google Performance Max, which is just sort of an AI-based way of figuring out how to optimize where you're doing your advertising on different campaigns, and helping to make sure that you're in the best places for your audience at the best prices. It's a little bit of just sort of a tweak to some of the ways that the campaigns have run in the past. So I think that's probably a more realistic example of how AI might play into what you're doing today.
For sure.
Maddie, I'll just jump in for a second. I know from an AI perspective, we are actually looking at it from a franchise development angle as well. We just had a couple meetings from a marketing perspective on how we can use AI to better connect with prospects. When they're coming on our websites, looking at certain content, what can we do from AI perspective that will get the right information to those candidates in a timely way? to better optimize the chance of us getting to them to get into our process. So I think we're in the process of just testing it and just understanding the feasibility of it. But I do feel like that is a trend that we're going to probably see more and more.
And honestly, the college me is pissed because how many times could I have just been like, oh, write this essay for me and probably gotten a B, instead of a B+.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the call out is great, is that we are using AI, whether you call it that or not, automating and optimizing, especially if it's, through software like Google, chatbots, workflows, you're already doing it. So, it's going to continue advancing. So just don't fight the data. Don't fight it. And then we've got 5 minutes left, franchisee adoption. So I love the term marketing your marketing to your franchisees, because you have to continue doing it. I broke down what I think most franchise segments are like. I'm sure it's a little different, especially for very happy systems, but for the most part, you've got 15% that own their marketing. You don't worry about them. They're famous in their community. You've got, a big chunk that will adopt the materials. The majority of the people that just run the same shit over and over again, even though you give them beautiful new creative. You've got the 15% that are like, I'm going to do it. And then they don't. And then you've got the 10% that are like, it doesn't snow in Florida, so I can't use this creative, Angela. What are you thinking? And then the 5% where you're like, how did you become a franchisee? So what are your suggestions, knowing you've got this wonderful Thanksgiving pie to deal with, to continue adoption rates and making sure your brand is not only growing, but staying within brand standards?
Well, first of all, our Florida franchisees are wonderful. I'm just going to say they would never complain. But what I would say, as far as franchisee adoption is, one of the most important things is just remove any barriers, make it as easy to use the campaigns as possible or the marketing as possible. So, have very clear templates, content written, systems or platforms in place to make it as easy as possible. I also think just showing the system that you're using data to make decisions about the types of campaigns that you're putting out there, rather than just pushing the campaigns out and saying do it, but being able to put more of a why. Like we are recommending this campaign. We've been very strategic in how we've decided to do it, and this is why it's going to be beneficial for you. And then building case studies is great. So if it's something where you've already had maybe a test group or a pilot group of franchisees, do something where you can build a case study to show how it worked for them. Get some feedback from them that you can share with other franchisees. Certainly in my experience over the last 10 years, franchisees like to hear from other franchisees more than they like to hear from corporate when it comes to advice on what they should do, because they feel like, their fellow franchisees are living in it just like them every day. So if you can have some franchisee advocates who are doing or have done the marketing campaigns and can speak from that perspective, and maybe that's part of your franchise advisory council or your marketing committee, or just a franchisee who's done the campaigns, I think that's a really effective way to help share with other franchisees what can work.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And it is so true. As much as they want to hear you speak and they want to hear the new materials, at the end of the day, they do what their fellow franchisee is doing. So, the more you can just give the materials and proper materials, and like you said, removing all the barriers, the better off you are. The best example I have for that is, I think when I was with Made Pro, they made this like 50-page brand guideline book. And I was like, that's great. No one's going to read that. I was like, so just give them the logos to use, give them the colors, make it easy. They know where to find them, download the fonts. Keeping it simple is often better, because, the more complex, it just feels hard. It feels difficult. We all know that. So, the simpler and the easier, the better the adoption rates. So continuing to move forward, we are now moving over to the guys who are going to chat about franchise development, goal setting and market expectations. Where are we investing our fran dev budget? And then, new lead generation strategies. I'll sprinkle some stuff in there because I was also franchise development marketing for a while. So I know this space very well. But without further ado, I'll start off with you, Josh, in terms of goal setting, how can you properly goal set for franchise development? And then also understanding that you want to meet your goals and bring on the right franchisees, because I hear franchisors are like, we're going to bring on 50. And I was like, new units. And I was like, how many have you brought up the last 3 years? They're like 10. I'm like, oh, okay. So, you know, what is your thought process around that, especially with brands who have limited territory in certain areas?
Yeah, I think, you know, goal setting, from our end is you just want to use a lot of data to come up with your number, right? You're not just whimsically throwing out, hey, I want to, you know, get 50 more units. There has to be some logic around why, you know, and what markets you want to enter into. You know, is this a market that's best for your brand? Is this a market that you're seeing success? You know, if there's a market where the four-wall economics aren't what they should be, you're not necessarily looking to grow there before you figure out why your franchisees aren't profitable there, right? And so there's a whole science that goes behind, you know, what area you want to go to in the first place. But what I like to do is I like to, you know, before recruiting for new people, I like to start with who we have. That's, you know, who are the best operators that we have that are doing the right things, that are well capitalized, and how much can we grow with them? You know, I'm a big fan of dancing with the one that you took to the party, right? You know, they can't always take you where you want to go, but you start with them, and it's easier for all facets of your brand, right? It's easier for your ops team because you're not having to retrain them, you know, especially if they already have that bench strength. It's easier for your real estate team because they already have a relationship with this group. And it's easier from a, you know, qualification and franchising standpoint because we already have all of your information. It's as easy as, you know, sending out an FDD, reviewing, and then, you know, moving forward on your deal. So I start with that. I start with who are our best operators, how much can they grow in this next year, and where should they? And then beyond that, you start looking at, you know, other things like, is their territory coming back? Is there an acquisition that we anticipate happening? Are there markets where we should be growing and we have a competitor that's growing there? And if we don't get there quickly with the right person, then we won't, it'll be too late by the time we get there, right? And so you prioritize what markets that you want to go to and win. And so there's a lot of optimization calls, we call it internally, around where we should go, why we should be there, how many units we should be pressing for, you know, how well should you penetrate a market, right? If you're going to Grand Rapids, you say, hey man, we want 80 stores. Well, is that, you know, are those stores going to make money? There's some brands that really made mistakes in that space. Namely, I think the most popular is Quiznos, right? Quiznos took off really fast, had a great brand, had a great concept, but they really cannibalized because they were growing, they could get more people in, and they just did it for the sake of doing it without being mindful of growing in the right way. And so that's a lot of what my team does. It's just making sure that, you know, beyond finding the right candidates, that we're, you know, going to the right areas for the right reason.
I like that. And then what about you, Brian? Because I know it's a little bit different when it comes to your territories, but again, you're very similar to Josh with multi-brands. You know, how are you goal setting there and making sure that if you're not getting enough leads or candidates, or your referral network's not working, that you're still bringing on the right people and not just anyone?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of our techniques are very similar to Josh and how he talked about. Like, we start with understanding our baseline and looking at data, right? So we look at the last, you know, 2 years probably in regards to the performance of our brands and what we were able to bring in from a unit perspective. And then from there, we then start with identifying the right existing owners that we want to grow with, right? Because some owners may be in different, you know, places in their business. So we like to use certain parameters and guardrails to help us kind of identify those owners that we want to grow with. And so from the baseline of that data that we've used over the last 2 to 3 years, we then, you know, kind of add in those units that we will be able to build off existing owners. And then from there, we like to put in what we call big bets, right? So there's always going to be 2 or 3 big bet strategic initiatives that we're going to take to actually increase the growth on top of that, right? So that can be, doubling down in some, the broker network, or, any M&A type of options as well. So we try to, keep it within 3 to 4 main components that's going to be able to drive that growth. And some of those big bets can be, to Josh's point, where it's more, about white space, right? What markets do we want to go into where we're underrepresented, right? So there may be some doubling down and really understanding, the upside of those markets and how we can identify the right owners to build in those markets as well.
Maddie, piggybacking on what Brian's saying there, and something you asked earlier about how do you make sure that you're finding the right person? Again, and I think a lot of times in a franchise development standpoint, it's neglected the opportunity to grow with who you have, and making sure that, the unit economics work, because if they are working, right, and people are making money, generally speaking, they want to make more money, right? I've yet to meet somebody that's like, man, I've made $300,000 this year. I'm good. They want 6, they want 9, right? They want to 10X that. Yep. And so it's, that's an early question for me. Like, if we have to go external to find new people, we have more of an internal conversation on why. Like, why aren't our operators profitable enough right now where we have a compelling story that they should allocate more capital into the models that we have? So that's the beginning for me. Yeah. And if you have those people internal, then it already answers the question on how do we find the right people? We already have the right people, yeah. So we don't have to find them. But if you are in markets that you have to find new people, I think that it is imperative that you really tighten in on who that person is. Saves you a ton of money from a lead standpoint, because if you're just jumping on, biz buy sell or prospect direct, and you're just broadly saying, hey, anybody that has a $2 million net worth, we want to talk to them. Like, man, you're going to get some of everybody. And if you start bringing some of those people into your system that don't actually know how to run your brand, they're going to open up stores and then they're going to close, or they're going to open them up. They're going to run poorly. They're not going to be able to grow. Like, there's just so many other issues that come from that. It is, in my opinion, imperative to work cross-functionally, get the opinion. Ops isn't in development, but they actually are, right? Real estate isn't in franchising, but they actually are. I would get those groups together and say, hey, who is the candidate that we're looking for? For us, we're certainly looking for people with, a decade plus QSR experience, man. If you've ran a steakhouse for the last 5 years, that's great. You're not getting in Dunkin'. And that's already pre-understood, right? So we don't have to waste any of our funds looking for people that don't actually fit that model. Another, I think, great resource to have, if your brand can have it, is a market planner. Not all concepts utilize one of those, but somebody that's removed from all of the personality profiles and the history of employment and they're purely looking at these markets based on our numbers, based on occupancy costs, based on 4-wall economics, based on any metrics of finance. This is where we should be, and this is how many we should have there. It really helps your team to hone in on what areas you should attack. And if you have those 2 things figured out, man, then you really got something going, and you find yourself having a lot of success.
Yeah, and I was going to pick back off Josh in regards to finding those right candidates, because we not just growing with our existing owners, but having our existing owners help us find those new candidates, right? Like in Neighborly, we have a program called Neighbors Like You, right? And we talk about it all the time with our franchise owners, where they have people in their network, right, that will be great franchise owners, because who knows better about being a successful Neighborly franchise owner than a Neighborly franchise owner? And they will know the type of traits, the type of skills and characteristics that we're looking for to be successful in our brand. So, building that partnership, not just with all the existing owners, but also the franchise advisory councils, right? Partnering with them to make sure that they're on board because they have just as much skin in the game as well, because they want to make sure that if we're bringing people into the brand, we're going to keep bringing in that same quality of owner that's going to keep the brand name strong. So continuing to build with the franchise owners is also key.
Brian, there's no chance we're going to finish in an hour because we ain't even going to get through this slide.
Okay, I'm done.
With you and I, but I have to piggyback on what you're saying, man, because that's so true. And you think about it, and that's why I go back to the four-wall economics. You know, we do a lot of SEO, we do a lot of trade shows, lead generation, all this and that. These guys all run, and ladies all run in similar circles. And I've yet to see a person who has a concept that they're just killing it with and they keep it to themselves. They're going to share that news all around. I mean, they'll be bragging, and their buddies are going to hear about that so often that they're like, man, I got to jump in too. Why? Not because they saw it online, not because they saw the type of money that this person is making and the joy that they have in that brand. And so the biggest part of recruiting, if you ask me, is how are we treating our current operators, and what is the return on their allocated capital? If those two things are great, your brand is going to grow, you know, regardless of the other things. You know, adding the other things is just adding fuel to fire. Yep. But you got to have that fire to start. And so that's, man, I love what you're saying, Brian. You getting me hyped, man.
I think what stuck with me too, and especially being familiar with this space, is if your existing owners aren't buying, why? And right. I went through that, and that's a big deal. And we'll hopefully get to the slide a little bit later on franchisee satisfaction and in operation stuff. But if you don't have your internals buying more territory or buying within your brands, and I'm one of them, I've bought outside the brand, I bought more territory, I bought in brand, there's something wrong there that external people aren't necessarily going to fix. And I want you guys to keep this one brief, but market expectations, people were saying if the Phillies won the World Series, there's going to be a recession. Well, don't worry, our Phillies dropped the ball on that. But people also assume, politics, is a recession coming? How do you guys build that into your goals for next year? Because I think that is something that a lot of people forget in Fran Dev, is that the economic trends of people wanting to spend and not wanting to spend greatly affect how our pipelines work.
Yeah. And I'll just jump in real quick and make it brief as well. But I think it's really critical for people to understand the economic, impact of what we do, right? Like when you're doing your goals and figuring out what you're going to, perform for, say, 2023, you have to be realistic and understand that there's going to be some headwinds that's going to adjust and impact your numbers. So, we all know that it's a high inflationary environment, so that impacts lending, right? So rates are high. How do you get through to candidates looking to, open up businesses? By walking through the math, right? And that's what we do. We actually walk through the math. A 2% increase in your loan is going to equate to another $150 a month, whatever the number is, right? Is that still enough for you to bet on yourself, right? We know that the fear of recession has really, spooked the stock markets. So a lot of people are looking to leverage, their 401s, their savings, and that's been impacted. So the volatility has a lot of people nervous to continue to proceed. So making sure that you can adjust your message to these candidates and say, hey, look, here's the money that you can invest directly into yourself and have a lot more control over the outcome versus just keeping your money in the market and just hoping that it goes back up, right? So between the, high inflation, the fear of recession, and then obviously the biggest one is just labor shortage, right? Making sure that people understand what's the right way to get around labor shortage. And Neighborly, a lot of our brands require, skilled technicians, kind of putting together, apprenticeship programs and things that will give candidates the comfort that if they move forward, they can actually still be successful. And then obviously having a recession resistant business and, home services, that's what we are. That's another thing you can do to try to, position your business wherever it is. How can it still maintain success even if we were to go into a recession? So I think those are kind of the things you would want to do. And then just take a haircut, right? If you're going to say you're going to do 55 in the perfect market, you might end up doing 50 to 47 because you might lose a deal or two on some of these economic headwinds.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying there, man. Three things that jump out to me when you're talking about market fluctuation. You certainly have interest rates, right, that lend to issues in your debt structure, labor, and then supply chain. And so all three of those we take into account. Starting from the back, supply chain, depending on, how long it takes to get an electrical panel, today versus what it was last year, that'll impact our scheduling. So we may sell the same amount of deals, but how we're going to schedule out that development and when those units should open, that's going to change. Labor, depending on what model you have, you certainly got to take that into account. So if labor is a big issue and, your model is a full service restaurant, yeah, man, there's going to be some difficulties. There's going to be people that are nervous about adding another one of those. But if you know that your model is advantageous to that, right, you have a concept that can run off of 2 or 3 people at a time, and you have an advantage on the market, it may give you an uptick. It may give you an opportunity to say that hey, we might do a little bit more because some of these other concepts aren't going to be able to sell as much. With Dunkin' and Baskin, we both provide drive-throughs, right? We have drive-through models, which when you look through the pandemic and, as the markets were diving, drive-throughs were up 40, 50%, nationwide. So everybody was clamoring to get into that space. And so you have to know what, it's not just about where the market is shifting. It's how the market is shifting and what is your advantage or disadvantage as a brand. A market shift could be the best thing that happened to your concept. Previous to Inspire and Dunkin', I was with Salad Works. As COVID happened, the entire world was now excited about learning about healthy concepts. It's really hard to sell donuts and burgers, when the whole world is dealing with respiratory and heart issues, right? But you're selling salads, in a fast casual space, that got a lot of people's attention, right? And so we doubled down on selling under Eric Lavender there, who's awesome guy. If he ever watches this, shout out to Eric. We doubled down on Salad Works at that time, and we're really successful. So, and then the interest rate, Brian, I don't think I could have said it any better. Work out the math. Sometimes people look at, oh, man, interest rates are up. I hear interest rates are up. I'm nervous. Then when you do the numbers, they're like, hey, are you not going to open up this business now because of $80 a month? It's like, oh, well, shoot, I thought it was a lot more than that. Now, and I think it depends on what kind of concept you have, right? Some concepts are going after dreamers. This is their first time getting into something. The family pooled money together. They don't care if that interest rate is 4 or 6. What they really want is to fulfill that dream that we own something, right? Or we got to get 2 of something. That's one group, inflation in that or the interest rates, it's not really going to impact them. A private equity group, though, that's playing with margins, and they have to have certain returns and certain projections that they had off of that return and REITs and things like that they have to yield on. Yeah, man, those interest rates are going to have a huge impact on scale. You're not doing that 100-unit deal that you thought you were doing if the interest rates jumped 4 percentage points. They're not doing it. And so understanding where your concept is in relationship to the market has a huge, huge impact on how you'll set your goals that year.
And of course, a middle school math teacher is going to know how to do the numbers.
You know what?
Salads.
my wife is very good looking, and we continue to have children. And I saw the slope of our expenses not keeping or far exceeding the slope of my income as a middle school math teacher. I said, hey, I got to get out of this, man. I got to find somewhere where the numbers work a little bit better.
Do the math, though. Such a good point. And so we're going to move briefly through this because we really did talk on this. So what the top lead generators are now, obviously you've got your search, your PPC, your social. By social, before you all hit me with baseball bat, what I mean is you need to be on there for awareness. Send them to a great landing page. Don't expect your Facebook form fills to be great because they're not going to be. The same thing. Yeah. If you're advertising for new prospects on LinkedIn, it's expensive. You're not going to have great success there. It's just, it is what it is now. And again, you have to be there. To Angela's point, even with consumer, you have to be where people are. They need to see you. When it comes to who they're going to choose in their top three, they're going to go with the people that they've seen the most. That's just how it is. Referral network, as Josh and Brian really pushed, that's going to be your biggest, whether it's out the network of your franchisees or your franchisee network itself. Those are your top candidates. And again, I love the point that Brian and Josh brought up of, if you have to go external, get really nitty gritty with it, because ideally you don't have to. And obviously this is a little different with emerging brands, but still rings true. Nail those personas down so you're not getting everyone and their mother, which leads me to what I'm telling you exactly not to do. Lead portals, you gotta be where the buyers are. So there are benefits there. There are some that allow you to click over to your website, kind of that halo effect, if you will. And of course, got to keep the phones ringing. So lead portals are always great for volume. You've got the broker networks. I'm sure Red is on here somewhere listening. Super great people, especially if your concept is healthy enough to afford that in a budget. I know broker networks, they always say, oh, they're so expensive, but really, if you develop those relationships well with your specific broker networks, you're not just, oh, I'm a part of it, where are my leads? Really pushing into that relationship, they can really develop, especially targeted territories, very well. Yeah. And then again, follow-up marketing, you can't set it and forget it. Just like I said, you can't set a landing page up and then expect people to then follow up with you via email or book a call with you. You got to follow up. And then new channels, CTV, still going to be great for Fran Dev. Localizing the digital, which is something that we're doing consumer, but I think is also super important for franchise development, is that, something that Netsertive does, which I think is great, is all of our advertising, across locations, which I know is consumer, but could still work for Fran Dev, is all of a sudden we're localizing it with your area name, your website, your unique phone number. So if I'm buying a franchise and I don't want to call a 1-800 number, all of a sudden I'm calling a 215, which is Philly. I mean, that's pretty cool to me. I feel like I'm talking to a unique rep. And then lastly, there is a lot of talk about geo-targeting, and especially if you have an area where we can, 4 new units are going to do great here, and I want to just, do my geo-targeting for Google search. That doesn't always work because the volume is not there. And especially if you're looking for volume of people who can afford your buy-in and are great entrepreneurs. So what I've been coaching a lot on is kind of that area takeover, where you might be using some more of your budget, but Indianapolis is going to be great for a Made Pro. All right, we're taking out billboards, we're covering PPC, we are doing direct mail, and really just covering it completely with, this is a business opportunity. That's going to do you a lot more good than potentially, going to a regional trade show or just hoping that you get something, from brokers and then a geo-targeted Google campaign. So that's coming up. Anything to add from Brian or Angela or Josh, any of you guys on what this slide kind of is all about?
Well, from our perspective, number 4 has been really big, and I know, like you said, shout out to Red, and I'll say I had a great time at his event in Hollywood, Florida, a couple of weeks ago. But that continues to be one of our biggest bets when it comes to growth and lead generation, is really investing in these broker networks. Like you said, not just attending, but actually taking the time to build the relationships with these networks. Because they have been very, very critical in our success, and they're going to be even a bigger part of our 2023 goals. So if you do have the budget, I do recommend you spending the time and effort to really double down and grow that relationship.
And I always say too, for that, building your budget backwards. So knowing how much it costs to open a new office, what is your acquisition cost, and then building it backwards from there. So all of a sudden you're seeing, say you use a broker network and you're doing the minimum broker fee of $35,000. Well, then $35,000 is probably going to be a threshold for how much you're paying for a new unit. So as you're building your budget, If you want 10 of those, well, then assume all 10 come from brokers, build it backwards. And that's a good way to kind of navigate that world. We are not going to get through this, but I'm going to briefly go through some of it, and hopefully we'll get through enough. So
Maddie,
the long game.
Can I throw one more thing into that last one?
Yeah.
I think all the things you're saying are great options. One thing we utilize as well, though, trade shows. Like those, I know a lot of people feel like those are dying. MFV and, Franchise Media Update and all those groups, the multi-unit show, they do a great job, man. And I think that although there's not as many people there that used to be, the folks that are there are very serious. We found a lot of success in that. Even shows that you wouldn't anticipate, the finance show next week, RFDC in Vegas, you find a lot of well-capitalized, serious operators that show up to events like this, man, and you really get an opportunity to get some rapid growth out of those guys. So I would add to this list trade shows.
See, this is why we bring in the top dogs. I would never go to a financial show. But yes, definitely great. And especially, expanding your search outside of just the major franchise shows. But like you said, the finance shows, business entrepreneur shows. Great heavy hitters as well. So now, while these trends still will work for single unit brands, we're going to talk a little bit about being an umbrella brand, franchisee satisfaction, supplier strategy, and cross marketing. We have literally 6 minutes, so we're going to kind of breeze through it, but here we go. So I think at the core is franchisee satisfaction. And I kind of broke this down into 3 parts. I talked a long time with the former CEO of MadePro, which is now Threshold, Mark Kaczynski. If you're on here, shout out to you, because he nailed it. MadePro was like 1, 2, 3 in franchise satisfaction for years. And, being part of that community, we really were happy. So I think the biggest thing to remember is research. Consumers do their research. Positive reviews, it speaks volumes, but the negative ones are louder, whether that's your franchisees or your consumers. Someone there, if you have a lot of negativity, it's going to spread, which then stems from your operational success. If your franchisees are not finding success, if they're not finding the support to then find success, they're going to be unhappy. They're going to have unhappy customer base. And that's also going to spread through their community, and you're not going to get the validations that you need to grow your community internally and also, with their clients. So just making sure that, you're remembering that this franchisee satisfaction comes internally and it starts with your corporate headquarters is important. I'm going to pass it to you guys, because I think out of all 3 slides, this is the most important. How do you guys manage this with multiple brands? Because of course, Josh and Brian, you guys are bringing people in and working with the current network, and Angela, you're the one that's dealing with it from the bottom up. So what is your thoughts on this?
And I'll just say quickly on the validation piece, we do a lot of informal kind of check-ins, like from a franchise development perspective, talking to these owners, seeing where they are, what can we be doing different, right? Calling them when we don't want anything, right? Just to really build the relationships, because that way you get the best feedback, right? It's not always a online survey monkey or anything like that, but you can get more genuine feedback. And then the more you can take that and try to move the needle, based off of that feedback, and you go back to those owners so they know that they're being listened to, they in turn become very great validators. And you have no problem sending candidates to these owners because they have some great stories to tell, not just from the business perspective, but they can also talk about how we listen to them and how we take care of our owners as a franchisor. So that's kind of on the single brand kind of format. But since we do have multiple brands, we even have franchisees of other brands sometimes validate with owners, because we want them to just get a neighborly perspective sometimes, right? Sometimes you want them to have some brand specifics from a franchisee, but having another perspective can also help in that validation process as well.
Yeah, I would also add in there, certainly the calls are meaningful, but I think not overlooking the value of site visits. And not just for the negative people, but for the positive people who are really happy too, getting out there and getting the FaceTime with franchisees to be able to have the conversation. I think especially over the last couple of years, we've really recognized the value of FaceTime over emails and phone and even Zoom. So being able to get out there to see franchisees, having some good dedicated conversations during franchisee conventions or times when everybody's all together, I think that's really meaningful. And then the other point that Brian made that I think is a big one is, you may be out there doing the surveys and getting the information, but make sure you're not only taking action on the information, but relaying back to the people who gave you that feedback what exactly you're doing. So we use Franchise Business Review. They do a great job for surveys. But every year when we do that, we try to do a presentation back to the franchisees after saying, look, this is what we heard, and this is what we plan to do with the information, or this is what we have done, depending on the different circumstances. But I think people want to know that they're being heard. There's nothing more insulting than being asked about something, and then it's like, you feel like it was in one ear and out the other.
Cough, cough, my husband all the time. And then Josh, what about you? I think a lot of people assume, the bigger the brand, you're successful, everyone's happy, but it's work. So what is your take on?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to make sure that franchisees are satisfied, but that's, and I think the bigger the brand, the bigger the games that are played. So I certainly think franchisee satisfaction is core. Again, a franchise, the whole idea of it is that you're creating a model, right, that's supposed to take capital and give a great return off of it. And so franchisee satisfaction being positive means that you're delivering on what you promised to them, right? And that means that now you have a sense of trust, and where people have trust, they'll continue to do business with each other and grow. And so the litmus test for me is, are they growing, right? Because some people will say that they're dissatisfied, and they'll play this game with you, that, oh, we're upset about this and that, so they can get incentives or they can get whatever else and try to milk you. But if they're still trying to buy another 10 units, they're clearly satisfied about something, right? And so when people are, regardless what they say, proactive about growth, there's a level of satisfaction there. If they're not, I think that's when you really have to look and say, hey, even if a person is saying that they're satisfied, why aren't you growing? Because if you were satisfied, you naturally, again, I've yet to meet a person in business that doesn't want to make more money. And so if you've gotten to a position of pause, you really got to dig deep and find out what that is.
And I think that's great. And we are at time, but I'll add just a couple more things is that, I've been on both sides of it. I've been, with a very satisfied franchise community, and I've been on the side where people are slinging some terms. And I think it really comes down to what Angela said. One, not only communication, but like, you're hearing us and you're dedicated to the owners you have, not just selling, new owners, because that's what we want. We all want the community to grow, but we want it to grow successfully. And then also, Josh, to your point, as a franchisor, being able to pinpoint what is the difference between unsatisfied and hangry, eat a sandwich and then come take this survey, right? So I think that's super important. Now we are at time. I'm going to show the next two slides. We had on the agenda to talk about kind of supplier strategies for nailing single and multi-brand, how that all works. And same thing with multi-brand cross-marketing, FranDev, which they've touched on. How are you selling between brands? How are you selling internally? And then also, consumers. So if you are interested in this, definitely ping me after this, shoot me an email, or, ping me on LinkedIn and let us know if you want a part 2, because I'm sure I can incentivize these guys to come back. And here are all their QR codes to connect with them on LinkedIn. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with everyone. This was great. I think we could go all day, but I'll let you get back to your very more important jobs. And, I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you guys at the next franchise conference.
Yeah.
Maddie,
thank you for having us. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Brian,
Thanks,
Angela,
guys.
great.
Thanks, guys.